Hi there. I'm Jacob Griffin Hall, the poetry editor for the Missouri Review, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Chelsea B. DesAutels, whose poems won our 2020 Jeffrey Smith Editors Prize. Her work is featured in our spring 2021 issue, What You Live For, right there. Chelsea is here to read from her work, which is wonderfully well crafted. It's full of heart and thought and emotional clarity. And after she's kindly agreed to talk a little bit with us about these poems and her other writing. So Chelsea B. DesAutels is the author of A Dangerous Place, which is out in October 2021 with Saraban Books. Her work appears in Plowshares, Missouri Review, Copper Nickel, Gulf Coast, Massachusetts Review, Adroit Journal, and elsewhere. Chelsea lives with her family in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And now welcome Chelsea B. DesAutels.
Hi everybody. Jacob, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. I thought I'd just read 3 of the poems from the Missouri Review, and I'll start with one called Maybe You Need to Write a Poem About Mercy, and this is written after Robert Hass. Start this one with the woman standing at the edge of the woods or the desert. It doesn't matter. What matters is she's standing under a darkening sky, and she knows at this point, having spent months in the hospital, that there's nothing she can do. No threshold between threat and tranquility, no demarcation she can draw around herself or her child for protection. Everything is actually everything else. The stone just kicked, and whatever comes next are the same. And knowing this, a great emptiness swells inside her stomach, an airiness she could float away on. And the night bellows and the sun rings once more, then slips under the horizon. Maybe then, a humming of an old tune, her own hand stroking her red hair, mercy. As in the story the man on the bus told me about his late wife, how by the end she'd forgotten their wedding even, and their children's names. And once she went missing in the depths of winter, dead bent on saving the cattle from the blizzard that years ago left all the calves frozen on their sides. He told me his wife saw angels. It was her last day. She was at home and the nurse called him to the living room where the bed was. His wife asked, "Do you see them?" And he said, "Yes." And together they counted the wings. When he told me this story, the man wasn't sad. He had just picked up groceries to make bread. He missed fresh bread, he said, and so he bought yeast and flour and fine kosher salt. He wanted to watch the dough rise. Because the man wasn't sad, I tried not to be sad too. He smiled and got off the bus. Out there, the street lamps flickered and the cold night grew, and off he went to warm his kitchen. I waved and wondered if there's a word for the way joy and pain are the same. How, if we're lucky, they thread us like an electrical wire cuts a tree. And there we stand, tender and green, reaching, charged, humming. The next poem I'll read is called Watching My Daughter Sleep. I remember when doctors said my breast milk would become toxic. How could you know what it means that in winter I soften chicken livers with shallots and butter, fed you with a spoon? How I fought to put a piece of myself into everything that nourished you. I would have braided my hair into challah for Saturday morning French toast if I had any hair left. Even now, even when we can't afford it, I feed you organic blueberries, sweeten your spinach muffins with pure maple syrup. Even now, I buy you cold pressed carrot juice with probiotics and put it on a credit card. It is not frivolous. And I'm not telling you this to prove my sacrifices. I'm as regret-soaked as anyone, as you will be. Loving you is the orchard creek freezing from the bottom up, bewildering, crowding, like lightning to the apple branch. It splits me. And I'll just read one more. This is called Vegetable Gardening. The birds wake me from another dream of loss, a marriage, a parent. My daughter builds a mausoleum for ladybugs on the south-facing window ledge. Surely she knows they're dead. One she finds on my pillow, two more by the front door. Her small fingers turn them over, lift without breaking a single wing. I let them be. What peace they may bring, these bodies, we don't know. What else should we collect but shells, vibrant and short-lived? I don't know. The daylight is sticking around now. Evenings, I drink wine on the steps by the cedar garden frame and wait for the soil delivery. I planted seeds in paper boxes and left them in my office under a reading lamp meant to mimic the sun. I'm sure I'm doing this wrong. Thanks.
Thank you so much for reading. I love those poems so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to hear them read aloud too. I've spent so much time with those on the page, and I'm really glad you chose those three too, because those three are three of the ones. I mean, I love the whole feature. Those three, move me a lot. Those are really incredible choices.
Thank you. Thanks so much. That means a lot to me.
Yeah. Well, and you talk in your author statement a little bit about the context of these poems, written in, as you say in the author statement, in the aftermath of a pregnancy caused cancer. And you also talk a little bit about form and inspiration for the poems. Like you mentioned earlier, one of the poems is written after Robert Hass's Faint Music, which is also a poem I adore. And this poem just goes hand in hand with that one so amazingly. But you also talk about three of the other poems being sonnets or sonnet variations. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the origin of these poems, whether it's the ideas or their form or their development over time, however you think about how they came into the world.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That's such an interesting question. I think one thing worth noting is that these poems were written over a period of probably like 5 years. The poem titled Watching My Daughter Sleep, that I think is the oldest poem in A Dangerous Place in the book that's coming out. And Maybe You Need to Write a Poem About Mercy is maybe one of the more recent poems in that book. So those two, I think, were written when my relationship to the disease was pretty urgent. When I knew I was sort of safe at that point, but I was still trying to figure out what it meant to me and what it meant to my writing. And I felt a sense of urgency as I was writing those. The other poems are much more recent. I think they were all sort of written during the pandemic, after the MFA, sort of on my own, without sort of a lovely group of people to go pass them to right away. And I think the recent poems, which I'm hoping are sort of going to ground a new manuscript, I think are a little quieter and maybe a little slower paced. I definitely am writing a lot of sonnets. I think it's just the sort of the structure of my life right now. I can get about 8 poems before my 6-year-old daughter needs something, or so truly by the time about line 9 rolls around, I'm like, oh, I have to do something to this poem, or all I've done is like written a poem about what I saw on my walk this morning. But that's been really interesting to encounter these sort of maybe more contemplative, or just having that sort of distance from the urgency and having maybe time to like think a little not deeper, but maybe with new perspective. That distance, I think, has sort of changed the newer work. I don't know if that makes sense or answers your question, but that's sort of how I think about him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's all. That all is perfect. And I don't know. I really love too. One of the things you say in your author's note about the sonnet is kind of what you were just talking about, of it being, it pushing you to say what you're going to say, and then around line 9, getting towards the end of the 14, just saying the thing and getting there and arriving. And I feel like these poems are poems that do that magnificently. They really transport you from the beginning to the end of the poem. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and I guess so. One last question before we sign off. We'd love to hear you talk a little more about what you are working on. I know some of these are from a dangerous place, which is forthcoming here in just a couple weeks, right? So has that been on your mind mostly, or do you have another project you're looking for, or anything you want to share about what's coming up?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that's so strange about this first book is that so much time has passed since I wrote the poems in it.
Mm.
And I've talked to friends who, are sort of further along in this writing journey and have two books, and have really talked about the difference between writing the first book and the second book. And I am very, perhaps naively, trying to take the same approach. So what's so nice about writing A Dangerous Place is there was no pressure. I was just writing poems and cutting my teeth on form and trying to learn how to fill different containers. And so I really attended the poems individually and then put them together and tried to see sort of what patterns were there and what might emerge. And that's what I'm trying to do with this next manuscript. It's tentatively called Above the Prairies Now Plowed. And what I'm trying to do is just write poems, attend to my craft, really sort of think about, whatever is sustaining me or pushing me forward that day until I have a big bulk of them that I think might be working. And then I hope to sort of see what it looks like at that point. So there are probably more efficient and better ways to go about it, but that's what I'm trying out right now.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear about it, and I'm looking forward to A Dangerous Place and whatever is coming after it as well. Um, we'll make sure to post the links for those as well, on our social media and on the page for when this video goes up. But thank you so much, Chelsea, for being here with us and for your wonderful reading and answers. And so for everyone on the other side of the screen, the Jeffrey E. Smith Editor's Prize for this year is underway, and we are excited and eager to read your work if you're going to submit. So thank you so much, and thank you so much, Chelsea, for being here. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. I've so long loved and admired the Missouri Review, and it's such an honor. And I hope that everybody sends their poem, and this is just one of the best places to have your poems cared for. So thank you so much.
Thank you.